Welcome everyone online. We have some announcements that we might want to delve into. Wednesday and Friday, of course, we've got the events going on. And we have financial statements for up through May available. The links are in the newsletter. Also, if you'd like a conversation, if you'd like me to give you a call, drop that info into the chat box. Actually, last week, I forgot to check the chat box when I finished. So if you left a message for me last week, leave it again. I'll do my best to check that chat box before I leave. You may have noticed in the newsletter I have included a countdown article. Over the course of the last several months, I've looked at this question of, my life's going to change here soon, and anticipating the shock of that transition when on Sunday morning I'm going to say, I should be doing something. I must be somewhere that I'm not right now. So to ease that transition, I have started to count down the number of Sunday talks that I'm going to be giving. So if that works for you to help in that transition process, so be it. Today's number 7, and as I pointed out in the newsletter, that as we finish this series on the 5 principles of unity, I had actually anticipated that we were going to have several weeks of tryout talks here at the end of my tenure, but it turns out the transition team has decided to do that after my departure. So I'd like to hear from you for those last 4 talks. I'd like to hear from you what you would like to hear me talk about in terms of the unity teachings. So it's kind of a what we used to call a unity Q&A, but this is spread over 4 talks. So give me some feedback. Otherwise, it may be just an open discussion. But anyway, so, Doug, if you would, offer us some music accompaniment. Thank you, Doug. I realized I was looking at the words, but you all didn't have those words in front of you. But at this point in time, I'm guessing that you already knew those words anyway. But with that, together, please, our affirmation for Living Water Unity. Living Water Unity is a thriving spiritual community inspired to embrace and share our abundant good now. I am empowered for joyful living by expressing God in each moment. And our daily word this morning, who would like to share that? Oh, I'm sure someone out there is just dying. Okay.
Today's daily word is realize. I realized the power of spiritual truth. I have had many aha moments through my life when something that had befuddled me for years suddenly became clear. It may have been something that I tried to learn in school, a skill I practiced and tried to master as I grew, or even an idea that challenged my understanding of the world around me. Whenever I realized something new, I would feel my world expanding, opening up before me in fresh and exciting ways, making me eager to discover even more. On my spiritual journey, I feel a similar excitement as I realize I have so much more than a spark of divinity within me. I am fully divine. I am just as I am fully human. I feel newly alive with the realization and so very grateful for it. And our verse today is, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Genesis 28:16.
Thank you, Sue. And our affirming prayer. Our affirming prayer, as we offer this prayer, a fundamental aspect of the power of prayer is from the place in consciousness that we offer the prayer. And the powerful place in consciousness that empowers our prayer is that sense, that embrace of unconditional love. So as I offer this affirming prayer, bring to mind someone for whom you care a great deal and feel that love that is present in that ideation of that individual. So holding that crucible of unconditional love, I'll then ask you for your offered prayers. And one at a time, we will consider those offered prayers in this unconditional love, embracing this offered prayer with unconditional love. And so recognizing that this present moment is the time that we commune with God. Wherever we are, whenever we are, that present moment is our point of communion. And so in that awareness, we rest in this awareness that God's love has no end and is a power that knows no bounds. God's healing power of divine life is restoring, healing, and revitalizing our world and our lives in this very moment. We let go of any fears or anxieties, affirming that divine order is now, has always been, and will always be at work in our lives. We bless our global family with the vision of fulfilling and empowering relationships filled with an abundance of love. And we express our own divinity in all we think, say, and do. And I invite you to offer your prayers now as we hold those prayers in this crucible of unconditional love.
I would appreciate healing prayers for my daughter, Kalika Reisler.
And so it is.
I would also like prayers for my granddaughter, Katie Tuttle, who will be doing the custody hearing tomorrow morning.
And so it is.
Rachel here. I'd like to ask for prayers for Angie and Joe. Angie is our niece. and she's now been discovered to have cancer in 3 areas of her body. Her brother Joe just went in for colonoscopy, and they found precancerous polyps with him. So prayers for both of them and for their parents.
Let's offer prayers for Angie first, holding her in this crucible of unconditional love. And so it is. And for Joe. And so it is.
I would like to offer prayer for peace and prosperity for everyone in our grandchildren's extended family.
And so it is.
I would like to offer a prayer of thanksgiving and gratitude for my husband Gary. Today is our 1st anniversary, and we are so happy to be together.
And so it is. I'd like to offer healing prayers for my good friend and minister cohort, Sharon Ketchum, and her family with the death of her grandson. And so it is. I'd like to offer healing prayers for several people in our community here. And I'll offer these in order or sequentially. For Betty. For Dee. For Lee. For Dick. and for Clarence. And so it is. Are there any other prayer requests? For all of those prayers not spoken, for all of those that are in need of prayer and perhaps not even aware of it, for all of those on the planet that are dealing with strife and stress and tribulation of various sorts, health and finances and careers, relationships, whatever the point of stress is. We invite them into the awareness of God's presence in their lives, the unconditional love emanating from the heart of God into and expressing through each and every one of us. And for this awareness, we give thanks. And so it is that together we say Amen.
Mhm.
So, Doug, I understand you have some music for us this morning.
Morning. I am going to play a tune from 1934 entitled For All We Know, because I really don't know.
That's a good place to be. I really don't know. And I remind you to switch your view to speaker view to have Doug in full and glorious color. And if you would, mute your microphone so that Doug remains in everyone's full and glorious screen.
For all we know, we may never meet again.
You know, every time you put your fingers to the keyboard, and I'm a witness to it, I appreciate so much.
Well, I appreciate your appreciation, because we don't always get it as musicians.
Well, what's it been? 20? Let's see. I think August of 1999 was when we first. I'm sorry. August of 2020.
2000.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah, August of 2000. And so we're coming up on 21 years.
You'd think I would have learned the tunes by now.
Well, I just so much appreciate your devotion to this ministry. So, thank you. Let me take a break.
And I missed the band.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Me too. So, hail, Creator! Indeed, we are each creators. And last week I mentioned the discovery through a study of 88 different case studies of people that had injuries to the base of the brain stem, that they have identified a particular place, a particular location in the brain stem that has an effect on some are calling it the religion circuit. That part of the brain that initiates or stimulates our desire for the religious experience, and and they've identified it not because they've put electrodes on it, but rather they've identified the injuries and lesions that occur in that part of the brain, and they have noticed the pre and the post injury or trauma effect on the person's inclination for spirituality. So it's not as if they've identified a particular set of circuits. It's not as if they've proved that that's the case, but rather based upon the evidence, they say that's where our impetus for the religious experience originates. So, because of its location in the most primitive part of the brain, we could infer that our quest for religious answers is a very old quest. It is from the earliest emergence of us as a sentient being. And I've talked about panpsychism in the past. I'm very much engaged in that idea that the universe is conscious, that consciousness pervades the universe, and that consciousness pervades every aspect of life here on Earth. And the fact that there is an aspect of the primitive part of our brain that initiates the conscious experience of who are we, who's in charge, why am I here? These profound questions are, I think, embedded in our structure. So the metaphysical answers that have come up with those questions, or to those questions, have resulted in Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and Taoists and Hinduists, as well as a multitude of indigenous religious traditions. And then that's not to mention the Catholics and the Presbyterians and the Amish and the Unitics. I mean, we have so finely divided our traditions based upon what we individually think is our appropriate path. And to complicate this further, we have the fundamentalists and the moderates and the liberals in most, if not all, of those traditions. Of course, I can't speak to all of the indigenous traditions, but I'm guessing based upon human nature that we have at least the fundamentalists, the moderates, and the liberals. And of course, for the travelers of each of these paths, we're individually certain or striving to be certain that our chosen path is the appropriate path for us. And I mentioned the striving to be certain because, in my opinion, that's where I am. I'm striving to be certain. You've seen me share this idea that we each have our experiences in which we test the principles of our lives. And so it's the striving for certainty that I aim this talk. Now, for many people, our religious tradition is inherited. Our parents believed thus and so, our grandparents believed thus and so, and our great-grandparents believed thus and so. And down through the generations, this religious belief, this system of religious beliefs is passed on. But for whatever reason, others of us have explored other traditions because what we saw our parents believe or how we have encountered those inherited beliefs hasn't worked for us for whatever reason. So for those of us who are gathered here this morning, unity is the path that we are currently exploring. And perhaps some of us have said, yes, unity is it. I know for me, unity is a strong candidate for my chosen path. I leave myself open for other ideas, other traditions, but unity seems to fulfill that for me at the present time. But the question that I continue to ask, or I continue to pose, is how valid is this tradition? How valid are the beliefs that are taught by unity? And by that I mean, to what extent do they enrich our lives? To what extent do they answer the profound questions? To what extent do they address our deepest desires? How does our system of our body of unity teachings, how do they enrich our lives? How do they contribute to our peace of mind, to our happiness, to our overall well-being? Well, we've been exploring the 5 principles of unity, and I'll just repeat that here. Yes, I will. There we are. One power and one presence. The one Son of God, the Christ, abides in each of us. We've covered both of those. This third one, and I consider this to be the central tenet of unity's teachings, and interestingly, it's in the middle of the list. But the thoughts we hold in mind manifest in our experience, and I call that the process. The process that we can test. We can put that to the test. And if that principle, that idea that the thoughts we hold in mind manifest in our experience, if that proves to be true, then it lends credence to the first premise and to the proposition that the one power and one presence, God the good, omnipotence, is true. That the one Son of God, the Christ, abides in each of us is true. And many of you may recall in Scripture we have from Luke 6:38, the measure you give will be the measure you get back. And ask, and it will be given to you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open for you, in Matthew 7:7. So these principles that we have been talking about are principles that have existed in the unity tradition, in for that matter, the Christian tradition, for the last 2 millennia. Well, 1 3/4 millennia. Because our Scripture didn't really come into being until as a composite Bible, and the New Testament was not formulated as a body of teachings or a body of Scripture until the 3rd century, 4th century actually. So these ideas are fundamental to the teachings that we offer in unity. And the interesting point for me is that both the premise and the proposition, that if they are true, then this third principle is true, that we are creative beings, that we are empowered to sculpt our life. Now, as you know, from these 21 plus years of ministry, that I am a strong believer in the scientific method. That is, that if we observe evidence out there, we see what's going on, and we try to figure out why it goes on. And we do that by establishing some kind of proposition, and we design an experiment and conduct an experiment based upon that proposition, and we look at the results of that experiment. And from the results of that experiment, we may either conclude that something is true, or we may decide that, whoops, the proposition is off. Let's go back and let's change the proposition, and then let's design an experiment and conduct that experiment and see what happens. So that scientific method is a method that has been a very solid process for us, a very solid method for us to arrive at the truth of our physical experience. And I think that it is also a valid process for the establishment of the truth of our spiritual experience. So, of these 5 principles, this third principle, thoughts we hold in mind manifest in our experience, is really the experiment. We've got the premise, the proposition, now we've got the experiment, and we're going to conduct some experiments in our life laboratory. And based upon those experiments in our life laboratory, we'll come to some conclusions. We may or may not go back and change the proposition, or we may decide that, well, that experiment substantiates the proposition, and we'll make some conclusions based on that. So, of these 5 principles, this third one is the place where we conduct our experiment. Now, it's important to note that this idea, the thoughts we hold in mind manifest in our experience, is really needs to be elaborated upon. It's the thoughts that generate the feelings that manifest in our experience. That is to say that it's the feeling nature, it is that feeling sense that is the portal to the creative process. And so as we establish thoughts, those thoughts need to be elaborated upon in terms of how we feel based upon those thoughts. And how we feel, that's the engine of change. That is the stimulus of the creative process. It's the feeling nature that is important in this process. So, it's also this third principle that identifies the fundamentalists, the moderates, and the liberals in unity. The fundamentalists will say every experience that we have is based upon our thoughts. Every experience that we have is stimulated, is created by our thoughts. Now that includes the car accident, that includes the illness, that includes the hurricane, that includes the earthquake. So for the fundamentalist of unity, our consciousness is the stimulus for the experience. And in terms of the hurricanes and the earthquakes, it's our mass consciousness that is creating that. Now, some of us might argue, as I might, that is really beyond the scope of the principle. But if you look at panpsychism and that the universe is conscious, that consciousness pervades the universe, you could make the argument that it is consciousness which actually stimulated the Big Bang, and out of the Big Bang came this flurry of elementary particles and forces that have evolved to the point where our star was born, and out of that birth of our star came the birth of our planet, and out of the birth of our planet came the conditions that allowed for the development of life, which allowed the individual, you and I, to be present. Okay, going that far, then maybe that's true. I don't know how to test that, though. I don't know how to put that to the test. So from a fundamentalist perspective, I'm not sure that we can test that third principle. However, a moderate might say, well, those events that we are personally involved in, the murder, the illness, the car accident, those events in our lives, the relationships, the jobs, and those events in our lives in which we are personally involved are the basis of are the result of our creative process, of that third principle, thoughts held in mind manifest in our experience. And then the liberal, and these are my categorizations, you can say, well, that's just hogwash, throw them out, that's fine. But I'm just offering to you that in this unity tradition, we have these three perspectives on that third principle. And the third principle is that regardless of what the stimulus of the event is, how we respond to that event, how we respond to that situation, that circumstance in our lives, is the result of our creative process, is the result of our creative skill. And I suppose it might not be surprising that I consider myself to be on the liberal edge, maybe a mix of moderate and liberal, but I am not a fundamentalist. Now, my prayer partner in ministerial school, Ellen Debenport, she's now in charge of the publishing arm of Unity Worldwide, not Unity Worldwide, but Unity World Headquarters. She holds the fundamentalist view, and I love her, I respect her, and I disagree with her. Nonetheless, what it comes down to is that in the testing of this principle, it doesn't make any difference where you are, because in the end, how we respond to the events of our lives will determine our peace of mind, will determine our happiness, will determine our well-being. So as we test this third principle, the question is, what is the basis of our happiness? What is the basis of our well-being? What is the basis of our peace of mind? And we can only answer that individually. We can only say, well, for me, I am happy because blah, 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 blah. Or for me, my peace of mind arises from this, or for me, my overall well-being depends upon this. So as we then begin to identify, oh, okay, I can now say what my test is about. And my test is about this third principle of unity: thoughts held in mind, manifested in our experience. Thoughts generating our feeling sense, held in mind, manifested in our experience. So we can do that one of two ways. In the retrospective, we can look back at our experiences and we can decide what it was that led up to that experience, what our feelings were, what our thoughts were about before that experience. Look at the experience and see what resulted from that experience. Or we can take a more active role and we can say, okay, what is my heartfelt desire? What is it that I am striving for here now? And we can then look at what our thoughts are presently, decide if those thoughts are generating the feelings that are necessary to accomplish that desire, and if not, change our thoughts. Change our thoughts so that our feelings are more in harmony with the desire that we have, and then watch for the results. So this principle of thoughts held in mind generating the feelings that manifest in our experience that's a valid test. And we can go back and we can make adjustments. We can run another experiment. We can look at our subsequent experiences and say, okay, if I want to be creative in this situation, I need to understand what my desire is. I need to understand what the preamble thoughts need to be, and I need to generate that sense of feeling that desire is going to, that will result from that desire being accomplished. So let's take an example. Someone give me an example of a desire that you hold right now, and let's look at how we might test that. And you can put it in the context of, well, a friend would like, if you don't want to get personal about it. So what's a current desire that you have? This is sometimes referred to as a pregnant pause.
I would have a desire to see new venues, to go to new places. And say that's the desire now, to experience new ways that people have in other places. Okay. And find out what the enjoyment is they extract from it, how similar it is to where you are now, and what other discoveries you will make, and how it affects your interactions with other people as you travel on.
Okay, now this is sometimes this is the difficult part, and that is to articulate what the feeling is from the accomplishment of that desire. So fast forward to the desire being fulfilled. How would you feel if that desire is fulfilled?
Very content and excited to grace new horizons and and a little bit of nervousness, the anxiety might creep in. Oh, it's will they accept me, or is this the right choice? And so it's a slight bit of worry, but it's more like this is an opening up. Just I feel spontaneous and just in a high state of anticipation and a lot of joy too.
Okay. Now, I'll point out a word you used was anxiety. And anxiety is a form of fear. It's a moderate form of fear. And it's important as we go through this experiment that we eliminate the fears in this train of thought. Okay? Because the fears are going to be an obstacle. The fears are going to emphasize for you that there is something to be afraid of, that you're not part of the all that is all, that there is a separation between you and whatever is going to be. But if we go back to the premise, the one power and one presence, then we would say, well, okay, there is no other. And so the fear is unfounded. So I encourage you to identify if there is a fear in this process, in this experiment, that you eliminate that fear. And you eliminate that fear through denials and affirmations, and we'll talk about that next week. But the point is that fear can be an obstacle to the fulfillment of this experiment, to the validity testing of this principle. Okay, so going then to that sense of joy, that sense of excitement, that sense of I'm trying to recap some words that you used there, but that sense of discovery, that sense of discovery, to feel what that feels like. Okay, so that sense of discovery, that sense of joy, that sense of excitement, get that feeling in place and solidify to the best you can that sense of, that feeling sense of discovery and joy and excitement. And then, what are the thoughts that will lead to that? What are the preamble thoughts that you need to establish? So you establish the preamble thoughts, you get the sense of that desire, and then you watch what happens when you practice holding those thoughts in mind and experiencing the feelings that come from those thoughts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the process that we're looking for here is identify the desire, establish what the feeling of accomplishment is of that desire, and then what are the thoughts that are necessary to establish that feeling sense, and watch what happens. And what happens is when you see the results of that, you can say, well, okay, that's interesting. That either proves that I am a creative being, or maybe there was something in the process here, for instance, the arising of fear, that niggling anxiety, or that, oh my God, what would happen if I really am a creative being? What kind of responsibility would I have? How is that going to take away my opportunity to claim victimhood of the circumstances that are around me? Those are valid, or those are aspects of this process that we need to refine so that we filter those out. We need to ensure that the process is one of identifying the desire, get a sense of the accomplishment of that desire, the feeling sense, and then establish the preliminary, the preamble thoughts that go along and will create that feeling. Okay? And then watch what happens. So that testing process is one that we can do. And perhaps unity is, well, it's not unique. There are other traditions where this is the case. The Buddhist tradition, as an example, is one very much that oriented to this process, this testing process. But there are some traditions where either you believe it or not. I mean, evangelical Christians accept that the Bible is the literal truth of God. It was spoken perhaps through various writers, but it was spoken from the mouth of God into the ear of the writer, and the writer was accurate in the depiction of whatever that message was. So, and the fundamentalists of each of the spiritual traditions believe that whatever the source of that knowledge was, whether it was God or Allah or Brahma or whatever, that scripture is the literal sense, the literal word of God. So, literal word of the deity. I'll not label it God because that's kind of Christian. So, as we look at this process, as we test this process, as we put this process into the laboratory of our life and determine whether or not it's valid, we can move forward from that point. We can decide whether this practice that we're talking about, whether we are creative beings, is really true. And if it's true, then we must accept the responsibility that if I'm a creative being and I'm not paying attention to my responsibility of being creative in my experience, then there is no one else to blame. There is no victimhood that I can claim. There is nothing that nothing that stands in the way of my achieving happiness, well-being, peace of mind. It's all up to me. So that's the choice that we have. We can test this process. We can determine the validity of this third principle. And then from there, we can either throw it out, decide we don't care, or move forward with that fullness of awareness that we are responsible for our own being. So there it is. It's a fun process. It's a process that we can look back on and we can say, yeah, my path is the appropriate path for me. My path is working for me. This path is the one that I'm going to explore further, with the awareness that I can change my mind at some point in time. I can decide how I want to modify these teachings. I can be either a fundamentalist, I can be a moderate, or I can be a liberal of the unity, in the practice of the unity teachings, and no judgment. But we have the opportunity. Let's take it. All right. Before our meditation, I'd like to share with you some music. The music comes from J.D. Martin, and here we go. It comes from Jan Garrett and J.D. Martin. Let me make sure that I have chosen. Yes, I have optimized sound for this video.
Buddy, my name is Jan Garrett.
I'm J.D. Martin.
And it's raining. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came.
I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, soft and easy, sweet and clear. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, and peace spread over the land. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, soft and easy, sweet and clear. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, and peace spread over the land. I dreamed of summer, and the winds changed, and the green was easy, and the rivers ran clear. I dreamed of summer, and the winds changed, and peace spread over the land. And the flowers bloom in the desert, and the air's fresh and clear. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, and peace spread over the land. I dreamed of freedom, and the moon rose, and the way was easy, the path was clear. I dreamed of freedom, and the moon rose, and peace spread over the land. And the guardian stars are shining, and the night is bright and clear. I dreamed of freedom, and the moon rose, and peace spread over the land. I dreamed of heaven, and the earth sang, and the sound was easy, and the song was clear. I dreamed of heaven, and the earth sang, and peace spread over the land. And the ancient pain is forgotten, and the Father's debts are clear. I dreamed of heaven, and the earth sang, and peace spread over the land. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, soft and easy, sweet and clear. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, and peace spread over the land. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, soft and easy, sweet and clear. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, and peace spread over the land. And the flowers bloom in the desert, and the air is fresh and clear. I dreamed of rain, and the rains came, and peace spread over the land.
Thank you, Doug, for that. That rain stick was Doug's doing. Let's take a few minutes. Not a long meditation, but let's take a few minutes. As we center ourselves in this present moment, as we allow ourselves to be aware of the present, allowing ourselves to settle into this quiet, private sanctuary of our own being. Let's look at how this process works. We identify our desire. And we see the feeling, we feel the feeling of the accomplishment of that desire. We get that visceral experience that yes, we are in this creative manufacturing process where we conjure the feeling of that accomplished desire. We explore the extent of those feelings, and we articulate to the extent possible. We articulate what those feelings are. As John offered his example, that feeling of discovery, that feeling of aha, that feeling of insight, that feeling of perhaps compassion, perhaps understanding, perhaps that feeling of joy, of bridging that experience through that discovery. Whatever those articulated feelings are, we rest in that. And then we hold those, while holding those feelings, we articulate the thoughts that we can hold to come to those feeling, to that feeling sense. Perhaps those thoughts are such as, I am open to the experience of others' perspectives. I am open to the experience of others' perspectives. And as we'll discover next week in our discussion of denials and affirmations, we might share a denial thought. That my present perspectives are not all there is. So we disempower perhaps our ingrained thought that my perspective is the right perspective, and we deny that by saying, I am open, we deny that perspective by saying, my perspective is my perspective, but not necessarily others. And then we affirm, I am open to the experience of others' perspectives. I am open to the experience of others' perspectives. A single denial followed by multiple affirmations of I am open to the perspective of others. I'm open to the experience of others' perspectives. And let that affirmation repeat itself. I am open to the experience of others' perspectives. And as we affirm that, we feel that outcome. We feel that sense of discovery and compassion and joy. I am open to the experience of others' perspectives. We allow that affirmation to be something that we draw ourselves back to multiple times during the day. Perhaps we want to dedicate a period of time at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, of offering the denial once and the affirmation multiple times. And we watch what happens. We watch how our experience unfolds. We watch what relationships arise or how our relationships shift to accommodate that new approach, to accommodate that created idea, that created experience. We pay attention to it. And in that experience, in that experiment, we validate. Am I a creative being? If we've done the experiment correctly, if we've eliminated the fears that are arising in that train of thought, that cascade of thought, if we practice our denial and affirmations, we can validate the truth that we are creative beings. We are responsible for our happiness, for our peace of mind, for our well-being. We are the captains of our experience. We are the sculptors of our life. And then we are responsible. We have the ability to respond to the slings and arrows that may be thrown our way, to the tribulation that might arise, to the adverse circumstances that may come upon us. We are responsible for our happiness, our peace of mind, and our well-being. And so it is. And so we come back into this time, we come back into this place, we come back into this awareness that here we are, right now. Where do we go from here? And so it is. Take a deep breath. Give yourself permission to be human. Well, Doug, if you will, our offering blessing. Let's do that. You may contribute to this ministry through your contributions through our website in the offering button or in the donate button through the first article of the newsletter, or you may send a check to this ministry to my home address, 3770 Longwood Avenue, Boulder, 80305. So, as we take our offerings in hand, or as we hold our offerings in thought, let us affirm this blessing. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love because I trust in God. And Doug, if you would, give us some accompaniment. And if you choose to sing, unmute your microphone and sing along. Yeah, it's going to be a cacophony, but that's good. Doug, are you there? Did you forget to unmute your mic, Doug? Let's see. Nope. Doug is unmuted. Well, Doug may have been called away. I'll see if I can do this a cappella. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
David, we need the lyrics.
Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as creator, family all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. My speaker was muted. Doug, I'm sure that you were playing along. And in my 21 years of ministry, I have avoided doing an a cappella, so I guess I've released the fear that I had through my mistakes. So,
I was coming through loud and clear here.
All right. Let's see. Let me go back.
Yeah, we heard you, Doug. We just didn't have the lyrics up.
Oh, boy.
Oh, I was coming through.
Together, please, our prayer of protection. Yes. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Kay, if you would, please.
Certainly. As we prepare to release our circle and extinguish this flame, we honor the divine light it represents, and we carry it within us into the world to protect us, to illuminate us, and to guide our actions.
Thank you. All right. So it is.
You got the meditation music going again.
Oh boy. There it is. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, my perspective was that initially we heard Doug and we're singing along without the lyrics displayed.
Yeah.
And then when you began to sing, we did not hear Doug anymore.
Yeah.
We only heard you.
That
So
was-
I don't know.
That's because I heard him say he couldn't hear me, so I stopped. I checked to see if the connections were right, and everything was right. So apparently David was the only one that couldn't hear me.
It was on me. Yeah. I had
And once he started singing, there was nothing I could do.
and nothing I could do either. Oh boy. Well, just look at it as an opportunity for forgiveness.
Well, when Doug mentioned missing the band, I do want to mention that Clarence and I saw Dylan yesterday.